So, so it's Sunday, the 23rd of August 2020, and at the moment I am in Twitter jail for 3 days for telling Senator Jerry Buttimer, or as I like to call him, Senator Ferry Buttplug, telling him to fuck off and die for his fake apology for attending that dinner for 80 golfers, which was in breach of the laws regarding COVID 19. I'm also, alas, in Facebook jail for 3 days, as of earlier today, Sunday, for referring to Jedward as middle aged rent boys. So, at the moment, my ability to have a profile online is very severely curtailed. It's interesting to look at today's Sunday papers and to see in them how the mainstream media is conspiring to hide the major issue regarding those politicians, those 80 politicians having a meal in a hotel in Galway, the Station House Hotel in Clifton in County Galway, and in which those men and women and various different people, we can get their names online, breached all the COVID-19 rules. RTE has already moved on from this and is back to doing what they do best and doing what they do with most enthusiasm, namely relentlessly promoting Leo Varadkar. Somebody who I have great respect for online, there's no other person who has changed my entire life outlook more than Thomas Sheridan. And Thomas always calls him Varadkar. He doesn't use the first name Leo. I only refer to it there for point of reference, but Thomas makes the very valid point that one should never address politicians by their first name, and I don't. I got that from him. I took that piece of advice from him. I had an instinct towards it anyway before Thomas said it, but I would always address them as Senator Buttimer or Buttplug, Taoiseach, Tánaiste. Leo Varadkar isn't the Taoiseach anymore, and the only person who seems to, well, he's forgotten that, and of course RTE have forgotten that, as indeed have the cat ladies in the Irish Times. Now, anyway, to get back to the point, 80 or so people, including Seamus Wolfe, as judge of the Supreme Court, and a number of politicians, had a dinner. Now, they were blatantly in breach of COVID-19 regulations. What the mainstream media are refusing to admit is that the conduct of these monsters, they're not people, the conduct of these gowls proves something that Thomas and myself and lots of other people out in the silent alt scene, where we're not being listened to by the mainstream, we've been saying this since late February, that COVID-19 is a scam. Not just that people have made mistakes, and indeed they have made mistakes, but that it is a deliberate scam. And Thomas makes the very, very valid, the most obvious point Thomas makes, and once he made it, then, it became very clear to me that those politicians, if they thought their lives were in danger, do you think they would have gone bloody within 100 kilometres of the Station House Hotel in Clifton, County Galway, Ireland? No, of course they wouldn't have. So the very deed, the very event proves that these people know that it's a scam, that the whole thing was a lie. Now, they can come out with as many apologies as they like, and it's interesting to see how all the normies are having a complete psychic fracture over this. But nobody in the mainstream is willing to admit that the very act of having that dinner proves that the thing is a scam. That is the most obvious fact that emerges from what they did. So they're being accused of breaking the laws, whereas if any of those politicians had from February or March said this thing is a scam, then at least they would be consistent. Where we all said it was, all of us out in the sane alt media said it was a scam at the end of February. I was on a holiday at the time in a hotel, and I was saying, this is bullshit, this is a scam. I was saying it to anyone who'd listen. So had I been invited last week to an 80 head or 85 head dinner in a hotel in Galway, I would have gone. And had I been condemned for it in the media, I'd have said, no, it's okay. I always said this was bullshit. I always said this was a scam. So in that knowledge, and in my always having openly said that the whole COVID-19 thing is a scam, I was quite happy to go to the meal. Had I been invited to that or invited to anything else, I'd go. There was a protest in Dublin, and it was well attended yesterday, in which people were not deliberately not wearing masks, and in which they were essentially, among certain other things, saying that COVID-19 is indeed a scam. Now, they're right to say those things, but the problem with those protests, and I never go on those protests, I never ever ever go on those protests. The problem with that is, first of all, the protest was hijacked by the usual right wing and far genuinely right wing lulas. And they're the fuckers who spoil everything. They very nearly wrecked the Irish water boycott that happened in 2014. People don't realise, even on the alt scene, how close those bastards came to wrecking this terribly important thing regarding Irish water. Now, people who are better than me went to prison in 2014, I think early 2015, in relation to Irish water. People like Derek Byrne and Bernie Hughes. And I have the height of regard for both of those people. Absolutely, I have the utmost regard for both of those people. But I always said to myself, do I regret not having done more regarding Irish water at the time? I always gave both of them great support then, as I continue to do. But should I have been part of the protest movement then? And I can't answer that now. But certainly this is now my chance to take on a scam and to take on another racket. And in so doing, what I'm saying to people who are listening to me is that if you want to register a protest in relation to the COVID-19 scam, given that these 80 or so gowls did what they did, then the way that you protested isn't by going to these public demonstrations, which, as Thomas again says, all you're doing is pleading with your bully to stop bullying you. You don't do that with a bully. You don't do that with a psychopath. You get away. Thomas also advocates NCEA, no contact ever again, and he's right. He's absolutely right. And again, he clarified that thought in my own head when I read his two excellent books about psychopathology. I bought the hard copies and I bought the Kindles because I thought they were so good. I'm actually reading Defeated Demons at the moment. When you're dealing with a psychopath, you get away. And I remember a situation in my professional life, I won't go into it now, I remember it as clear as day. I was dealing with a boss who was a psychopath. And I subsequently, over a year and a half later, when I was in a safe position, made a complaint against that man. And I made a very formalised and detailed and rigorous complaint. But I had to, at the time I was subject to that boss, not let that individual, not let that beast think for a second that I was going to do what I was going to do. Because something Thomas said in a video when he was addressing a gathering in Glastonbury is, if they think that you're a threat to them, they'll do anything. They will do anything that they possibly have at their disposal to destroy you if they think you're a threat to them. So, as Thomas advocates, NCEA, get away. Get away safely, and then when you are in a safe position, what you do is you drop a dime in them to whoever is in charge. And that's all you can do. And I did that with that person. This was back in the year 2001. So I had the right instincts, but it's Thomas who helped me to crystallise and clarify my instincts. And it was Thomas who had the concept NCEA, no contact ever again. And he's right. It's the only option. So we're dealing with psychopaths here in Ireland today. The psychopaths, of course, are the politicians. Varadkar being Varadkar, as Thomas... I love his microaggression. It's a super microaggression. Varadkar. I think it's just fabulous. Well, Varadkar, there is this psychopath who is enabled all the time and ass-kissed by Artigi and the childless abortion cat ladies in the Irish Times. With the politicians who are at the dinner, there is the lie that's still being propagated that COVID-19 is not a scam. So what one does is you don't go to protests and you don't go banging on the doors of these fucking psychopath politicians. What you do is you register your protest by refusing to wear a mask. I have refused to wear a mask consistently since this whole load of bullshit began at the end of February. At the time, of course, as I've already mentioned, I was on a holiday in a hotel. Now, when I came back from the hotel, I had spent 12 nights in a really nice hotel in Mayo, in the Mulranny Park Hotel in Mayo. It was well worth the trip. Such a nice hotel and such nice people who work there. Very, very well run hotel, and they treat their customers absolutely like royalty. And it's not expensive either, they do good deals. But when I came back, I got a taxi from Mulranny to Westport. I got a crowded Westport to Dublin train. I got a bus, or I got the Lewis over to Busaras, and then I got the 31 bus from Busaras home to Howth. That was the time when if that virus did exist, which it didn't, but if it did exist, that's the time that I would have got it, because it would have been at its most virally active then. And nothing happened. Nothing happened to me. So I came home, having travelled on crowded public transport across Ireland. I came home to my two 90-year-old parents. And between then and now, nothing has happened. So if there was ever a situation where I was exposed to people incubating it, it would be the Westport to Dublin train, the crowded Lewis between Euston Station and Busaras, and then the somewhat less crowded 31. And by that stage, when I had returned from Mulranny, it was early March, around the 6th of March of this year. So all the hype was, the hysteria was well underway in relation to COVID-19. Yet I didn't get anything. Yet my parents didn't get anything. I have refused to socially distance. I have refused to wear a mask. I have refused, notwithstanding the fact that you have to obey the law, or the Gardaí might stop you, or there may have been lockdown restrictions pertaining to travelling around Dublin, and I'll always obey the law. I won't do what Gemma O'Doherty did and berate a poor hapless beleaguered Garda sergeant. I'm not going to do that. But Gemma O'Doherty's behaviour in that video to that Garda sergeant was absolutely disgraceful, because people seem to think that the guards enjoy having to police all of this bullshit. I can assure you that they don't. The guards want to go after serious criminals. They want to go after, drug gang lords, and they want to go after burglars and rapists and joyriders and all this kind of thing. They don't want to be stopping people from going and having a meal in a pub, or stopping people from driving around the country. That's never been the relationship with the Gardaí. That does lead to something else. The whole lockdown scam, the whole notion of locking a country down, was designed in countries and jurisdictions and places where the relationship with the police is fundamentally different from the one in Ireland. People give the Gardaí a hard time, yes. People say that there's institutional corruption in the Gardaí. There was. There may still well be. May well still be. We look at how they treated Maurice McCabe. That's not a once-off. That's an institutional issue regarding the abuse of Maurice McCabe. So for people to be saying, the guards aren't corrupt. The guards are corrupt, or at least they were until quite recently. Not assuming that they're not corrupt now. But if you take day-to-day rank and file Gardaí, they don't want to be oppressing law-abiding citizens. And that oppressive relationship that exists, say, in Spain or other countries where the police have an oppressive and bullying relationship with people, ordinary normies in Ireland and ordinary respectable law-abiding people generally don't clash with the Gardaí. And the Gardaí are in a crude way, I suppose, careful not to pick on law-abiding people. There is an ethos in them, and it's very easy to vilify the guards, but it's also important to try and look for some of the positive attributes that they have, and one of them is that they don't like oppressing innocent law-abiding people. Genuinely they don't. I know that. I know Gardaí. I've talked to them at length over many years. They don't like going after people who are going to have a drive to the city centre, or people who want to go for a meal, or people who want to go on a holiday to the west of Ireland. That's not the relationship they have ever had. They didn't have that relationship at the start of the state in 1922. And what we're seeing also is that the Gardaí are being politicised. Now you're dealing with a very primitive gowl, a monster with Varadkar. So the notion of boundaries, the notion of constitutional boundaries, legal boundaries, procedural boundaries, that would never enter a head as primitive and as empty as Vardakar's. That wouldn't happen. But what is happening is that the Gardaí are being politicised. And I don't think they're very comfortable with this. So if legislation is going to be coming in by statutory instrument or by primary legislation enacted the Oireachtas to allow the Gardaí to go into people's homes when they're having parties, and then you hear that cone-headed monster, that thing, Stephen Donnelly, salivating at it, salivating at the prospect of the police entering private homes. There's a number of possible, and they're not either or, there's a number of possible outcomes to that. Subtly and quietly, without saying anything, the Gardaí might mutiny. They might just decide, maybe at some administrative level within the ranks of the Gardaí, just not to do it. But I could imagine the Gardaí. I rang a Garda station when I heard they were going to be allowing, or Stephen Donnelly was, slavering over the notion of Gardaí going into homes. And I spoke to a Garda. I rang a Garda station outside of Leinster. I rang, if you want to talk to them at random, it's better to ring an out of Dublin station. I said, tell me about the prospect of Gardaí having to go into people's homes, or having the right to go into people's homes without a warrant. I don't know, said the Garda. We haven't been told anything. Right, I said, and how do you think, if you are going to go to a house party without a warrant, I said, how do you think that would roll in Moyross or Finglas? And the Garda said, your guess is as good as mine. And I let him go then. I hung up because I had taken up enough of his time. But I thought that was a very commendably candid answer on the part of the Guard. They're not enthusiastic about having to do shit like that. And they're not particularly well. The Gardaí, the rank and file Gardaí, they don't get a great salary. It's as they, become sergeants and inspectors and superintendents, chief superintendent, assistant commissioners. They rise up through the ranks, then the salary gets better. As they stay on as rank and file Gardaí, the salary gets better. But these new young people in their mid to late 20s who are recruited into the Gardaí, they're not paid very well. They're being asked to do all this kind of shit. Well, let's see how that rolls. Let's see how that one rolls, because we're getting back to what I said earlier. The guards don't want to be oppressing people. They don't want that kind of relationship. So, if somebody in Nolan's supermarket or wherever calls the Gardaí because I've gone in not wearing a mask, I'd be interested to see how they take that. It's a waste of their time. It's a distraction from them. So this returns to the primary point. COVID-19 is a scam. That dinner done by those 80 monsters, they're, as Thomas again said, what we're seeing now is all the normies saying, sure, he resigned. Sure, he apologised. What more do you want? Well, what I want is for them all to be burnt on top of tyres as traitors. These people have committed an act of treason that has damaged this country immeasurably. And for God knows how long. These people who went to that dinner, those 80 or so monsters who went to that dinner, are traitors. They've committed an act of treason. They should be killed for what they did. Thomas talked about cutting their throats, but I think a far better use, you dispose of old tyres as well, is to put them all on a pile of tyres and set fire to it with petrol. That would be as good a way of doing it. Those people should be heading for prison. They should be doing 15 years for what they've done to this country. And then you have, as Thomas said, there's going to be in the next few weeks they're going to be rehabilitated primarily by RTE. And there's going to be satire, or what RTE calls satire. RTE have never done satire. I do satire because when you're offending them or when they're calling you a disgrace, that means it's working. When the politicians and powerful people are saying, oh, I looked at anybody remember The Folks on the Hill, which was on BBC Northern Ireland? It was fucking raw sewage, The Folks on the Hill was. It was appalling shit, The Folks on the Hill. That isn't satire. That is tribute. That is paying tribute to these people. Well, they're not people. And if the politicians were coming on, I sat down with my daughter, so I did, and I switched on the wee TV. I do it every week, and on comes The Folks on the Hill. I laughed. And I laughed a wee bit more. Well, then that's not satire. But when the politicians are saying, that needs to be shut down, you're a fucking disgrace, we're going to try and blackball you and shun you, well, then that is satire. So, for example, 3 years ago, I did a meme of Leo Varadkar standing in front of the burnt down Grenfell Tower and the traveller accommodation in Shankill. And I gave him a speech bubble in which he said, "Ha ha, they won't be getting up early any time soon." That caused a lot of offence to a lot of people, so that meant it worked. I was pleased with that. That meant it worked. Politicians contacted me and they said, "We'd really like you to take that down." I said to them, "I'd really like you to clean my bell end with your tongue." They didn't reply to that. But that's satire that's working. Satire has to attack and it has to make people feel uneasy. And anybody who thinks that I was laughing at the individuals who were burnt alive in Grenfell Tower or were burnt alive in Shankill is a normie. Anybody who's not a normie would know that I'm not laughing at those very, very unlucky people in Grenfell Tower or in Shankill. I'm not laughing. I was using Varadkar's crassness, his speech that he'd given about people who get up early in the morning. I was using it against him. The fact that it caused so much offence showed that it worked. That's satire. So anyway, the key takeaway is, to show your protest against the COVID-19 scam, don't go to protest marches or all that shite, and don't hang around with wankstains like Ben Gilroy. The thing to do is just when you're going out to buy your pint of milk or your loaf of bread, unless you've worn a mask already, then you're fucked. But if you haven't worn a mask until now, well, now here's the time really to harden your resolve, because you're actually doing a legitimate protest. And if you're arrested for it, you could say that. That would be a legitimate defence. I was doing a protest. What kind of protest are you doing? I was choosing not to wear a mask in protest at the conduct of the 80 or so politicians and other bigwigs who were at that dinner in the Station House Hotel in Clifton in Galway.